We have a very intriguing session now. I'm so interested in it. And, you know, we got a collection, a power trio of rock star speakers, and they are going to be talking about death to death and asking the question, are we reaching the end of human death? So this is amazing. This is a session about longevity, a session about cutting-edge news from the sector, and a session about what this all means to us. So I'm going to welcome our speakers on one by one. They are just fantastic speakers. We're going to welcome to the stage the author of The Death of Death, José Luis Cordeiro. Welcome, José Luis. Gracias. A round of applause for José Luis. Thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant. Excellent. And I like the tie. Very good. Muy bien. And now we're going to welcome to the stage the chair of London Futurists. Please welcome David Wood. Welcome, David. Thank you. A round of applause for David. Wonderful. And there are three speakers. I mentioned it's a power trio. So we're going to now welcome, via the magic of technology, the CEO of BioViva Sciences. Please welcome to the stage Liz Parrish. Liz, are you here?
I'm
Fantastic.
Here.
Welcome, Liz. Me. Awesome. Okay. Ladies and gents, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Well, it is so great to be here for almost the closing of the South Summit about the most fantastic topic in humanity, health and well-being. And I am so proud to be with my dear co-author of the book, The Death of Death, David Wood. He also studied in Cambridge, but University of Cambridge, England. I studied in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And we have another friend also joining us from the USA, Liz Parrish, who is patient zero. And she will talk a little bit more about patient zero, what it means, what she has done, and what she hopes to see in the future. But talking about the future, I like to say that in the next 20 years, we are going to see more changes than in the last 2,000 years. I repeat, because this is difficult to understand, in the next 2 decades, we are going to see more technological changes than in the last 2 millennia. This is truly the best time to be alive, to remain alive, and maybe to live indefinitely. So much so that we are probably between the last mortal generation and the first immortal generation. Isn't that exciting? Isn't this really a fantastic opportunity all of humanity has to improve our health and well-being? And so we have this session about the end of human aging. And I am going to ask a few questions to my colleagues here. First of all, I want them to introduce themselves very briefly. So let's move to the USA. Liz, how are you doing, Liz? Good morning in the USA, and tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Liz Parrish, and I'm the CEO of a company called BioViva, and we are looking for genetic cures for biological aging. So we want you to live a very long time in very good health based on your genetic profile. And so we specifically look at genes that will increase your healthy lifespan, making more time on this fabulous planet to enjoy all the things that you love to do.
Liz, you look so beautiful, and you have rejuvenated 20 years. I hope you will tell us about your secrets later.
Okay.
And now here I have my fantastic British co-author, David. So David, who are you?
So my name's David Wood. My professional career was 25 years in the mobile computing and smartphone space in the days before there was Androids or iPhones. And from that, I saw the pace of technological change, slow, 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 fast, fast, fast. I've been chairing London Futurists since 2008. I have had nearly 300 public meetings in which we have often discussed the subjects that we're going to be talking about now, the prospects for having the same sort of thing happening with the technology for anti-aging. Slow, 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 followed by rapid transformation.
Well, talking about that, actually, in the time of the Roman Empire, life expectancy, average life expectancy, was about 20 years. a century ago, it was 40 years, so it doubled. It took almost 2,000 years. Now it has doubled again, certainly in England, in Spain, it is about 80 years. And we believe that maybe in 2 decades, it's going to double again. So my question, Liz and David, my first question is, how do you see longevity research and longevity trends in the last 30 years, 20 years, 10 years? What has changed? So Liz, what do you see changing?
Oh, well, that's a fabulous question. So, since 1944, when the first term of DNA was coined, we've come a long ways. And I know that's going back farther than you wanted to, but we're in the gene therapy space. And so, the double helix is essentially exhibited to the world in 1953. But things really start taking off around in the 1960s, when the first mediated transfer of genetic material via a virus is actually shown. And since then, the anti-aging or the aging treatments in gene therapy start to expand with the development of gene therapy itself. So Michael Rose starts to show through evolutionary biology in the 1970s that aging itself may be malleable, how we age and how long we live. And Cynthia Kenyon in the 1980s shows that you can double the lifespan in model organisms via the changing or modification of genes. And so since then, 5 gene therapies have been approved for monogenic diseases, rare diseases like severe combined immune deficiency. And in the meantime, other groups like Maria Blasco and Ron DePino started to show that aging was malleable in organisms such as mice. Even our company BioViva in the last year has released a paper that shows that we can increase the lifespan of mice by 41% just by the addition of a simple gene that we already naturally have, but we upregulate through gene therapy. So in the area of gene therapy in the last 30 years, things have changed dramatically and will continue to do so.
Beautiful. And David, how do you see this progressing, changing in the last few decades?
30 years ago, you had to be completely crazy to work in the field of anti-aging, directly trying to make changes in organisms that would cause them to live longer. Everybody said, don't work in this, it's the end of your career. It's impossible to extend the lifespans of organisms. Don't you know evolution has done the best possible job? You can't possibly be cleverer than evolution. But as Liz mentioned, a few really crazy people like Michael Rose and Cynthia Kenyon proved that you could extend significantly the lifespan of some organisms by small interventions. And more people started to think this could be a field worth studying. So what's happened since the 1980s is an exponential growth in the size of the community of people doing serious work in this field. In the 1980s, it was about 10 people at most. By the 1990s, maybe 100 people. By the 2000s, 1,000 people. And now we're approaching 10,000 people in various ways working on this. And it's not just individuals. It's not just academics. It's not just bold startups like Liz Parrish's own company. It is also increasingly some of the largest, most powerful, most capable companies in the world, or their founders. So recently, we have seen Jeff Bezos funding significantly a startup called Altos that aims to extend lifespan, healthy lifespan. The Google founders put a lot of money into a startup called Calico, and they've done work in other fields too. And it's not just the great Western companies. Increasingly, some of the largest Chinese technology companies are strongly interested in healthcare too. So what we've seen is that aging has changed over this period from being a fringe activity, mainly something you had to come to terms with. You could be poetic about aging, you could be philosophical about aging, but now aging is increasingly seen as an engineering problem with an engineering solution within our grasp. And it's a difficult engineering problem, very difficult. It's going to require huge numbers of people to come up with the right solutions, but more and more people are engaged. And in the future, I see this tenfold increase in the size of the community each decade is likely to continue to be the case.
Wonderful. Now let's move from the past into the future. So Liz, what do you think will happen in 10 years, maybe 20 years, even 30 years into the future, if you dare to see that far away?
Well, we're getting published this month for a paper that shows that gene therapy may actually improve the cognitive scores of a population with dementia. We'll continue to see the gene therapy space start to tackle one aging disease after another, which is fantastic. In 20 years from now, we should start to see this technology disseminated to the average person. We hope to be the company behind democratizing it, meaning making it inexpensive so that everyone can afford it. And in 30 years from now, we should start to see these gene therapies being used in much younger people as immunizations against aging itself. So you would take the therapy to stop the damage that you're incurring with time, which is what aging is, cellular damage over time, and keeping your body in a safer position. Then, it really comes down to your lifestyle to increase your lifespan in maximal ways. Over 30 years, we're going to start to see the modification of much better therapies than the ones that we've started with today start to be disseminated around the globe that will have just a much greater impact on aging itself.
In the last 5 years, you have rejuvenated yourself 20 years. Can you tell us about that and what does it mean to be patient zero?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2015, when I started the company, I took 2 gene therapies, telomerase reverse transcriptase, which is a gene therapy that lengthens the ends of the chromosomes that are called telomeres. It also has an impact on the epigenetics of the chromosome, basically making it more stable. This gene therapy has continued to work in my body. And the other gene therapy that I took was one called follistatin. Both of these gene therapies are associated with extending lifespan, but follistatin itself increases muscle mass. So my muscles got stronger. Today I'm 50, but my telomeres in my white blood cells, those are the cells that are tested, are much younger than my biological age. And we're going to release a paper on that. I have done more than one gene therapy, just so people know. And so it made it so we had to wait to get the data from the latest gene therapy that was over a year ago now. I'm really excited to be part of that. I've also taken a gene therapy called Clotho, which is associated with longer lifespans and better cognitive performance, and a gene therapy called PGC1 alpha that helps to turn white fat into brown fat and increases biogenesis of your mitochondria, which are your energy cells. So today our company works with 4 gene candidates, and we're starting to put those together this year into drug candidates for humans.
Fantastic, Liz. And you certainly don't look over 30 years of age.
Oh, thank you.
And now let's ask David. So David, what do you foresee happening in the next 10, 20, 30 years in terms of longevity?
So I'll start looking forward by looking back, because I believe as a futurist, you get better foresight from better hindsight. So I want to start with the year 1900. What did most people die of in the year 1900 in countries such as Spain or the UK or the USA? It was influenza, tuberculosis, pneumonia, gastroenteritis leading to diarrhea. And there was not much that people could do with these diseases. People prayed, people hoped to get natural balance, but people died in vast quantities at early ages. And then there was a crazy new idea called the germ theory of infectious disease, something that people couldn't easily see, but it was increasingly understood from the 1870s onwards. And people found a common approach that, by this single method, addressed all of these infectious diseases, and many others too, by improving hygiene, by developing vaccinations and antibiotics, and so on. That's why the diseases I mentioned from 1900 are nothing like as serious today. Today, what do people die of? They die increasingly of heart disease, cancer, stroke, and complications from diabetes and from dementia. And in the same way that the biggest causes of death in 1900 had a common underlying cause, namely germs, these same diseases I mentioned today, the chronic diseases, have a common cause, which is aging at the cellular level. And that is the change that is increasingly developing over the next 10, 20, 30 years. More and more of the funds that are currently going into individual diseases will change and will go into addressing the root cause, aging. But in order to turn that from an idea into practical reality, you need better tools. The only reason scientists from the 1880s onwards can make progress with the diseases of infections is they had better microscopes. They had better methods of synthetic chemistry. They had better ways of manipulating simple drugs. Well, it's the same today. We will need to take advantage of new tools and techniques of the fourth industrial revolution. And the story of the next 10, 20, 30 years will increasingly be AI everywhere, doing much more things more powerfully than before, nanotechnology interventions everywhere, biotech interventions, and neurotech interventions. And they are going to come of age in the next 20 years, so much so that I can say there's about a 50% chance that by 2040 there will be widely available, low-cost, high-quality rejuvenation therapies for everyone. It's not a done deal. There are many future scenarios in which this will not come about. But if humanity gets behind this great project, if we throw off some of our other distractions, if we apply the research funding wisely on this new paradigm, then we can make that progress. And we will look back at the current time and say, why didn't people see this sooner and act sooner?
Today, there is a lot of discussion about aging being considered a disease. Obviously, 30 years ago, this was impossible. Aging was natural. But now more and more people are beginning to say that aging should be considered a disease. One of them is my friend David Sinclair, who also studied at MIT, but now he's at Harvard. And he published a fantastic book that I highly recommend, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. I recommend his book almost as much as you should read our book, The Death of Death. Almost as good, right? But the point is that David Sinclair, he says that we should declare aging a disease. And he's working with several governments in Australia, where he was born, in the United States, where he lives, in Singapore, in other places, to see which is the first country that will declare that aging is a disease, but a curable disease, a curable disease. So I want to ask you, Liz and David, what is your take on aging as a disease? Liz, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I absolutely believe that aging is a disease. I've said that since 2013. It follows a pathology perfectly, signs and symptoms, and then the bringing together of all those signs and symptoms into a state of disease. So proof in point, so what are the biggest killers on the planet today are aging-associated non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases, as David was alluding to, kill 74% of the population. The top 4 non-communicable diseases are aging diseases. if you cured one of the diseases of aging, it only increases the lifespan of that person by a couple years, because they will die of another disease of aging. So, you might think that your grandfather has heart disease and that he died of heart disease, but he actually had a lot of parallel symptoms that would have just taken over after the heart disease was the most evident condition that he had. So if you cure cancer, you only extend the average lifespan of humans by about 4 years. So it really is the process of biological aging underneath these aging associated diseases that is the disease itself. And the sooner that we decide that as a society and at the government level that aging is a disease, we can pour more money into that research. So aging really is mitochondrial dysfunction, telomere attrition, stem cell depletion, nutrient sensing issues, genomic instability. These are some of the hallmarks of aging that actually drive the processes of aging that lead to things like inflammation and the problems that we eventually lead to the diseases that we die of. Those diseases are merely a symptom of the aging process. So it's very important that we consider aging, biological aging itself, a disease.
How about you, David?
So aging is something that can be medically addressed and medically treated. This is absolutely clearly the case. And there is going to be a trial very soon of an anti-aging drug. You may have heard of it. It's called metformin. Some of you might take metformin for diabetes, or you may have relatives who do. People noticed a funny thing, that people who took metformin tended to live longer than people who didn't take metformin, including people who didn't even have diabetes. So why was this? That has now been investigated. Some of the changes that metformin make are similar to some of the genetic changes that have been made in some of these other organisms we spoke about already. So after a lot of discussion in America with the Food and Drugs Administration, they agreed there can now be a test to see whether, if we give lots of people in their 60s and 70s metformin, how long will they live? How long until they get these major diseases of aging? This is a big step forwards. It's a sign that governments are prepared to get behind interventions that will make this kind of difference.
Well, as you see, there is still discussion, even among people like us that are on the field of proposing and working towards anti-aging real technologies. But we will soon know, because this is moving so fast, this is accelerating very fast. So, a quick question. Give me your top 3 treatments that you see coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. Liz, just name the treatments, therapies that you would like to take in 5 to 10 years.
I will continue to take the gene therapies. I probably will take, again, the gene therapies that I already did. I'm very excited about the general population getting more access to things like metformin, things that will slow their aging whilst they wait for these bigger technologies that are in more of an experimental phase now. And I look forward, of course, to the combinatorial gene therapies that will be coming out that a myriad of companies are working with. I'm looking forward to seeing what Altos is going to do with the Yamanaka factors, which reprogram cells to be youthful, because of course we would like to create less expensive, more democratized versions of those therapies. So I'm going to continue to watch the space, and everyone out there, you should, eat healthy and exercise and be really excited about your future.
Fantastic. And your top 3 therapies, David?
Well, in the short term, it's continue to eat less, intermittent fasting. That puts the body into a mode in which it does some repairs. So that's something which I do 5 days a week, except when I'm in Valencia, when the things get away from me. But that's a good step forward. Having plenty of sleep is important as well. But we're looking to the new interventions that are possible, and I'm sure that in 5 years' time there will be new interventions that AI has discovered which are not yet on anybody's drawing board. And the way AI can do this is it can figure out the likely interaction of drugs in lots of new circumstances. We've got lots of information about thousands and thousands of drugs that failed in their original purpose, but there's enough documentation about them, so AI can now investigate, could they be used in new circumstances. The company In Silico Medicine, which is headed by Alex Zavaronkov, is breaking new grounds with discovering new drugs in this method. And as the AI becomes more powerful in hardware and software, it is very likely that many more new drugs will be found. Not just the drugs we know of today, but drugs that have the same effect, but without accidental bad side effects. And all of that can increasingly be modeled by better deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence.
And I have a final question, which is, why do you want to stop aging? I mean, after all, we have aged and died until now. Why do you want to stop death and aging? Why do you want to make it optional? So Liz, what is your take on that?
So I got involved in this area after my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I was immersed in the world of childhood disease, and I wanted to find cures for kids. It just so happens to turn out that every gene that my company works with will also treat a childhood disease. And so we feel that using these technologies and people who understand the risks will help to develop them more quickly and create longer lifespans for children, and therefore giving these kids not only a normal life in which they live at a normal rate as everyone else, but a much longer life in which they get to gain back those years, and we get to spend that time with them. You know, if you're 80 years old, you're only 80 decades old. We're still children when we die. And I think that human civilization could do so much more. We have so much more expanse. We can go to outer space. We can go to the depths of the sea. We have so much more to learn and to care for here on our planet and to care for each other. And that really takes lifespan.
Can I be a bit controversial? I think today's acceptance of aging by most people is comparable to most of history, most societies accepted slavery. They said, it's not very nice to have slaves, but we need slaves to organize society. You can't organize society unless there are lots of people who are treated in this way. And most holy books, most religious books, didn't seem to mind slaves very much. They sort of said, well, we'll take it for granted. Well, people realized, due to Christian inspiration, due to people from lots of different persuasions, we could organize society in better ways without slavery. In the same way, more and more people are saying, it's time to stop accepting aging. It's time to seek to abolish aging, because that will lead on to so many more good things.
And I want to close with a final thought about this. Why should we stop aging? Because it is the noblest thing we can do. The number one human right is the right to life. Actually, it should be the only human right, because without life, there is nothing else. So this is the most humanitarian thing we can do, stop aging, so that people live in a fantastic world in the future. Because remember, we are between the last mortal generation and the first immortal generation. So where do you want to be? Thank you so much.
Sign me up. Fantastic. Thank you so much. My goodness. What an amazing session.